They move in rooms where the clocks do not tick but breathe, where time is not measured by the quarter hour but by the century. The air carries the hush of ledger paper and the faint polish of rosewood, and somewhere behind a panelled wall a grandfather clock inhales, then exhales, and a dynasty makes another unhurried decision. This is how the old houses work. They do not chase time, they keep it. You can see it in the way the Rothschilds built their world like an orchard rather than a crop. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the family spread from Frankfurt to Vienna, Naples, Paris and London, establishing banks that treated crises as seasons rather than storms. The story told about carrier pigeons after Waterloo may be romantic, yet what matters is the verified architecture of patience that followed: meticulous information networks, diversified holdings, estates like Waddesdon Manor in Buckinghamshire, and a habit of preferring bonds and railways that paid in decades. The family's posture was not a race down a trading floor. It was a long walk along a well-mapped avenue. The British understand this stroll. The Grosvenors, the Dukes of Westminster, turned fields west of London into Mayfair and Belgravia, but they did not sell the land. They leased it. Long leases, quietly renewing, kept control lodged in the freehold, while tenant after tenant refreshed the facades. A townhouse might change hands a dozen times, but the ground beneath remained an annuity. Patience there is not a virtue, it is a title deed. The Cavendishes at Chatsworth, the Cecils at Hatfield, the Howards at Arundel, all learned the agricultural logic of wealth. Never eat the seed corn. Thorstein Veblen named this theatre of restraint in his study of elite display. Yet the most telling ornament remains the invisible legal instrument that matures on its own: the lease, the trust, the entail. The Company Limited by guarantee, a web of paper that ages into iron. Across the Channel, the Agnelli family in Turin practiced a very Italian patience. Fiat, founded in the closing years of the 19th century, became not only a car maker, but a civic institution. Under Gianni Agnelli, aristocratic as a winter fox and twice as elusive, the family controlled through holding vehicles such as IFI and later Exor, letting capital sit and accrete while fashion changed and markets swooned. They bought Juventus not for spectacle but for continuity, turning a football club into a family heirloom. Italian villas at Via Perosa kept a calendar where an investment is allowed to grow until a grandson asks a question, and a granddaughter reads the minutes of a board meeting like a family letter. In Sweden, the Wallenberg family wrapped time in governance. They built a system of patient capital through foundations and the investment company, Investor AB, stewarding firms such as Atlas Copco, ABB, and Ericsson. Their motto might as well be printed on frosted glass: concerned, not owned. The money is placed so it cannot be hurried without penalty. When winters come, as they always do in Stockholm, dividend streams and layered holdings become the knitted wool that keeps frost from the bone. An impatient fortune is naked by comparison. Canada prefers a quieter snowfall. The Thomsons of Toronto built a newspaper and data empire that evolved into Thomson Reuters under the gaze of Woodbridge, the family's investment arm. They are the kind of family that buys time before buying anything else, letting assets compound away from gossip. In Quebec, the Desmarais family used Power Corporation to assemble life insurers, asset managers, and industrial stakes, cross-pollinating boardrooms so that ideas could move at a measured pace. The Irvings in New Brunswick planted forests with harvest cycles that stretch across generations, pairing sawmills with shipyards and refineries until a map of a family and a map of a province begin to rhyme. The Westons grew a bakery into George Weston Limited and the grocery giant Loblaw, an empire of flour and aisles, where margins are thin but the calendar is thick. The Molsons poured their first beer in Montreal in the late 18th century. they are still toasting the same wager that a steady thirst outlives any fever. Old money reads the past the way some people read markets. It takes Defoe's plain warnings about bubbles, Adam Smith's cool suggestions about patience, and the later agitations of Karl Polanyi about embedded economies, and then it files them under household practice. It collects books, yes, but also collects habits. The French see it in families like the Rothschild branches of Paris and the Betancourts, whose L'Oréal inheritance grew because it was neither left unattended nor plucked bare. In Germany, the Quandt family's shareholdings taught a lesson both cautionary and clinical. History sticks to a name, and reputations compound too. The patience that grows capital can also keep records alive, and old money knows both the privilege and the responsibility of that ledger. On the American side, the Rockefellers show how time can be engineered. Standard Oil's shards were not the end but the beginning of a different geometry. Trusts, foundations, and a portfolio approach that treated philanthropy like a second balance sheet where social returns compound in decades. The Mellons used art collections and banking to the same effect, and the DuPonts turned chemicals into estates and then into a museum of gardens, a botanical calendar bound in brick. If you walk through Winterthur when the azaleas wake, you are strolling inside a quarterly report written in petals and hedgerows. The newcomers sometimes mistake speed for strength. They count days. Old money counts harvests. Consider the Guinness family of Dublin, whose brewing fortunes were not expended in a single lifetime but scattered across hospitals, schools and housing, a slow rain on the city. Or the Pictet partners of Geneva, who kept their bank private, cultivating the trust that only accrues when partners understand they are temporary custodians of an address that must still be respectable when their portrait's yellow. Even the House of Habsburg, a dynasty that outlived fashions and frontiers, operated on a schedule longer than any sovereign's breath, marrying policy to patience, land to law, and leaving a reminder that compounding power follows the same curve as compounding interest until history intervenes. There are techniques to this temporal aristocracy. The first is to place assets behind hedges of law so that panic cannot reach them easily. Trusts in Jersey and Guernsey, foundations in Vaduz, family holding companies in Amsterdam or Luxembourg, Quebec family trusts that weather language, laws and tax reforms alike. The second is to prefer the asset whose clock is slow. Land on a 99-year lease, utilities with regulated returns, a minority stake with veto rights, index-like cash flows that are boring enough to be beautiful. The third is to turn reputation into currency. A Mayfair landlord with an unblemished record can weather recessions with an eyebrow. A Montreal name that has never broken a promise can negotiate rates that would make a spreadsheet blush. This is what Pierre Bourdieu would call social capital, but the old families call it Tuesday. Canadian patience is especially fond of infrastructure. Railways built by men in wool coats became pipelines of trust. The Bronfman family, whose Seagram empire moved from whiskey to film and back toward finance, demonstrates both the potency and the peril of changing timeframes. When a family trained on decades plays a Hollywood game built in weekends, the calendar fights back. Contrast that with the Baudouin Bombardier line, where snowmobiles grew into aerospace and rail technology. The time it takes to certify a jet is not measured in social seasons. Those who endure set their watches accordingly. Listen carefully to the European accent of time at the dinner tables of Paris or Milan, and you will hear another instruction: own things you can touch. Vineyards like those of the Rothschilds in Bordeaux, the Antinori family in Tuscany, or the Primum Familiae Vini Consortium are not merely liquid poetry, they are calendars with roots. A vine does not care for quarterly calls. It answers to weather and to memory. This is why old money likes soil. It matures at the speed of truth. Books whisper the same lesson. In the stately biography of John D. Rockefeller by Ron Chernow, The Titan's true asset is restraint. In Niall Ferguson's double volume on the House of Rothschild, the instrument is information compounded over time. In Thomas Piketty's Heavy Arithmetic, capital's gravity increases when time is allowed to collect it into planets. The moral, like a thin gold line on a barometer, rises slowly and then all at once. The rituals of time are domestic. A Canadian matriarch in Westmount keeps a ledger of charitable gifts that long ago became the family's second genealogy. A Scottish laird lets a forest ripen because a grandfather once said, "The wood will be needed when none of us are here to see it." A Swedish foundation chair reads a factory's quarterly not to admire profits but to examine apprenticeships. A ducal estate manager in Cheshire signs another 60-year lease and does not smile, because the smile will come when a great-grandchild posts the rent without thinking about where the ground ends and lineage begins. None of this is to sanctify. Patience as a habit can become indifference as a posture. History binds and indicts. The same families that boast of stewardship must answer for the shadows in their archives. Yet the underlying craft of time remains instructive. When cities change, those who leased rather than sold keep a hand on the hinge. When currencies wobble, those who own pipes, toll roads, land, and utilities sleep longer. When tastes pivot, those who bought companies rather than products need not repaint. If you want to hear how old money tells time, stand inside a museum endowed by a brewer in Dublin, a banker in Pittsburgh, a newspaper baron in Toronto, or a duke in London. The plaques on the wall are contracts with the future, written in the handwriting of the past. They say, in effect, that wealth is not what can be spent, but what can be waited for. Patience in this world is not passive. It is an active verb, a daily discipline, a quiet refusal to let urgency set the table. The nouveau riche wave a watch like a flag. Old money keeps a calendar like a diary. One is concerned with now, the other with afterwards. One hunts a moment, the other breeds a season. In the salons of Paris and the boardrooms of Stockholm, in the granite houses of Montreal and the limestone squares of London, the lesson is the same. To be wealthy is to own a different kind of clock, one that sounds not like ticking but like breathing, and in that breath is a promise. Take care of time, and time will take care of you.